Hey everyone, it's Ashley. Welcome back to the Trinity Stamps YouTube channel. Today we're going to be doing some masking with this larger stamp from the Let Love Grow set. And this is going to make it appear as if it is a sort of background stamp. And really all we did was some masking and repetitive stamping. I'm going to be using a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of cardstock. And this is a 3 1/8 by 1 7/8 piece of cardstock as well. Both are 110 pound. This is going to hold my sentiment, so I'm going to put it right in the center and I'm going to mark off the corners here so that I have an idea of what will be showing once I stamp it. For my masks, I used a full sticky back Post-it note, and what I actually did was take the full pad and stamp it once on top, and then I was able just to pull off a chunk of them and cut around it as close to the line as possible, which is always the rule you want to follow with creating masks. And I was able just to cheat that way and get a few more masks out of just one cut. I'm also using Memento Tuxedo Black ink because I will be doing some Copic coloring, and this is Copic Safe ink. Which just means that it won't make the alcohol in the Copic markers won't make the ink run. I have decided to use an acrylic block rather than a MISTI for this because I will be repeat stamping. You could definitely use a MISTI if you are concerned about getting the images clear and crisp, but you will have to remove it and sort of line it up each time again, which I think is not what the MISTI is intended for. It certainly could be used that way, but for me, this type of stamping happens a little more easily for me with an acrylic block, just the old school style of stamping. So as I mask this, I will just remind you that when you're masking, you always have to think about it being opposite. So normally anything that you would stamp first and then stamp on top of that, obviously that would look like it was underneath anything else. So anything that you would normally stamp first would of course be underneath. When you're masking, you have to think about it as everything that you stamp first is going to be on top because you've masked it off and you're stamping on top of that. So the lines that would normally go over it are now not going to be there when you pull that mask off. And that's very important to remember. So because I've now stamped all of these images and I'm masking them, each one is going to look like it's underneath the last. So to change up the pattern a little bit, you'll see here in just 1 second, I rotate the cardstock a bit so that the actual bottom left corner, which will be the top right when I'm stamping it, will look like it is on top. And I just thought that this might be a little better. You can see here I go ahead and turn it. I just thought it might look a little more organic if not every single thing was stamped right on or underneath, I guess, another. And that was just my preference, but I think that it actually does end up looking a lot better in the end result. But that's something that you can sort of make a decision on as you're doing this. I just wanted to clarify why I went ahead and skipped those spaces. It's also nice that I skipped the spaces because I'm able to fit the stamp in there how I need it to be to cover up that space or to take up that space. So I have these leftover masks and I will just save them for another time. And now I'm going to go ahead and peel off these masks here, and it is going to look a little confusing at first because there's a lot of lines without them being colored in, but you can see that it just looks really, really nice, and like everything, like I said, like everything is just sort of growing together. There's no lines overlapping, which is really nice. I purposely left some of those spaces between because we're going to be doing some drop shadow shading. And for this, I'm using W5, W3, W1, and the colorless blender. And basically this is just going to make it look like these blooms are a little bit raised and leaving some shadow on the cardstock. So I'm using the darkest color, which is W5, right up against the line. I'm then going to W3, W1, and then I'll bring it out a bit with my colorless blender. And I'm going to speed this up so that you can see the process and how I do it, but you don't have to sit here through the whole thing. Coloring this entire panel took quite a while, so I also do skip some of the Copic coloring later on in the video, but I wanted to be able to show you this drop shadow shading because I think it's very popular right now, and I am really enjoying it. I like the dimension or the sort of assumed dimension or the percepted dimension that it gives. It doesn't actually give any dimension to the card, but it looks like it does, and it gives a lot of interest. And that's something I really appreciate in the design of a dropped shadow. As I said, I do go ahead and speed this up in just a moment, but if you are interested in any of the colors that I used on the card front, they will all be listed in the description. I decided to go for a nice bright yellow for these main larger blooms that sort of show up all around the card. So I've used V17, V15, and V04. That V04 gives it a really nice bright pop, and the V17 is pretty dark, so I like the contrast there between the two. I've kept a pretty earthy tone throughout other than the VO4. For the rest of the card, I used a nice mellow yellow color. I've also used a sort of less saturated pink. And for the gems, I've used a B05 for the actual lines, but then a BG10 to color it in. And for gems, I think that this is especially a cool look because it looks like the saturation is where the crystal sort of meets, and I think that that is at least a bit true to life. So I'm just going through here and coloring in some of those spots that I may have missed before. You can see that I neglected the center because I am going to be putting my sentiment panel right over the center, so you won't be able to see it, and I didn't think it was necessary to spend the time to shade in the center. I'm going to be using my Mini Misty to stamp my sentiment, and I'm using the Let Love Bloom stamps, and these are all individual stamps, but together they do make a really lovely sentiment. And I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is my favorite ink to use for sentiments because it really gives nice detail. I've used my Mini Misty for this because I want to be able to line up each individual stamp since they don't come in this orientation, and I wanted to not have to guess each time. I wanted to stamp the next word with an acrylic block just to see if it was going to be straight or not. I wanted to just make sure I did it right the first time with the Misty. For my dimension on this card, I'm going to be using craft foam, and my craft foam is not adhesive on either side, so I just glue my sentiment block right to the craft foam that's cut to the same dimensions, and then I'll glue it right there in the center, and that's it. That's the entire card. I hope that you've enjoyed. While the coloring did take quite a while, the makeup or the design of this card was fairly simple, and it looks like a really intricate card. Like I said, of course, the coloring did take a while, but the design itself, the stamping, it was all very easy. I love using masking for things like this just to make designs look a little bit more intricate and fun. I hope you have enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, link to my personal YouTube channel is in the description, as well as all of the supplies used here today. Thank you so much, and I will see you very soon. Thanks. Bye.